University of North Carolina. Tar Heel coach Dean Smith was greeted by applause this afternoon at the arena named in his honor. The winningest coach in basketball history says he is stepping down.
I have decided to resign as head basketball coach at the University of North Carolina. There's been much speculation over the last 24 hours. I am healthy outside of no exercise, which I will begin on Monday with a James Worthy diabetic golf tournament. I'm going to walk. Each year I've been saying, maybe for the last 8 years or so, maybe it's time to go do something else.
Well, Dean Smith is going to do something else. He's leaving North Carolina at the top of his game.
The Tar Heels were in the Final Four for the 11th time last season. Smith's only losing season was his first one. Starting in 1961, Dean Smith began a legacy of strong ethics, making a difference in each young person's life. Former Charlotte Mayor Richard Vinroot was on his first team.
When I was serving in the Army in Vietnam, the person that I heard from most in my year there was my mom. The person I heard from second during that year was Coach Smith, and he was writing to one of the poorest players that he ever had on his team.
He recruited and coached one of the South's first high-profile black players, Charlie Scott.
Coach Smith's philosophy was that he didn't want you to think of yourself as any different. He didn't want anybody to think that he thought of anybody else as any different.
Forest Hill minister David Chadwick says Smith gave him integrity.
It's important to be who I am publicly and privately, that there's a similarity between the two.
He was the second father to me, as well as he's second father to a lot of Carolina players.
Dean Smith, at age 66, retires as the winningest coach in college basketball history, with a career record of 879 wins and 254 losses. The Tar Heels are just 9 days away from opening practice for the season now. They are considered one of the contenders for the 1998 national title, a title Smith has won twice in 1982 and 83. That'll now be... Those are not the right dates for the title, but we'll move on. They'll now be working towards that title under the leadership of longtime assistant coach Bill Guthridge. When students on the Chapel Hill campus got word of the retirement last night, they gathered outside the Dean Dome. Many of them wanted to reserve a place to watch today's announcement. Others expressed their feelings about the coach with blue chalked messages scrawled on the sidewalks. And they chanted, "We love you, Dean." Coach Smith's neighbor and rival says he's surprised by the announcement today. Duke coach Mike Krzyzewski says he feels that Dean Smith has just always been there.
But also what he's done for the ACC and helping make the ACC the best conference in the United States, and then just what he's done for college basketball.
And coming up a little later in sports, the big guy will have more on the retirement of Dean Smith. He'll have reaction from the Tar Heel basketball team, as well as from the man who will be taking over as head coach, Bill Guthridge. And you'll hear from the man who had long been rumored to be the permanent replacement for Dean Smith.
Congress will vote next week on a proposal that would start the process to move the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse. America's tallest brick lighthouse is in danger of sliding into the Atlantic Ocean. Congress will decide whether to spend $2 million to study the best way to move the lighthouse. Some people want the lighthouse moved, while others want to build a structure around it that might prevent more erosion.
And if you've never been there, folks, check it out, because there's something about standing there near that lighthouse. It's awesome.
It is special, isn't it?
It is. I mean, you're just on. Speaking of awesome.
Oh.
Hey, folks, what can we say, folks? Class is out for the dean, but the class still remains with the dean. Let's make that official, huh? He did indeed say today that he's going to retire, and did, as head coach. After 36 years up on the Hill, look at the house. The house was packed at Dean's Dome for the announcement. He says the desire to go through the rigors of another NCAA season, it just wasn't there. Dino was asked how he wants to be remembered.
I hope. I don't know. He knew a little basketball and did a good job and lived happily ever after, and loved his players and received loyalty in return.
Oh, you got plenty of that, Dean. The numbers tell the story, folks. The winningest coach in history. 879 wins, 2 national championships, 11 trips to the Final Four. We could go on and on. As proud of that record is, I think most proud, of course, he would be the first to say, how about 97% graduation rate? Huh? Not bad at all. Now, the Heels have named longtime assistant coach Bill Guthridge, Coach Gut, as he's affectionately called by the players, as the new head coach. This is no interim deal. This is a multi-year contract for Coach Gut. He spent the past 30 years sitting next to Dino right there. Loyal lieutenant, takes over now. Don't look for any changes.
I've had other great coaches to work with, but the last 30, of course, with Dean Smith, and I think my philosophy and style will be almost identical to him, with hopefully the same results.
You know what? Talking about demeanor, you know, Dean can get a little excited on the bench, and I'll tell you what, Coach Guthridge can get a little bit. He went after Lester Drizel a few years ago up there at Old Carmichael. A lot of folks remember that. So he, a little temper there, Soaks. Maybe it will be tempered. We'll see. Kansas coach Roy Williams has often been mentioned as an heir apparent, if you will, to Dean's job, but he says Bill Guthridge is the only choice to take over on the Hill. Williams a bit emotional today as he watched Dino's announcement.
React, and when he said that he was retiring, it was a very difficult thing to listen to because of what he means to me and what he means to a lot of us.
Could he be coming back to Chapel Hill down the road? You got to remember, folks, what Dean Smith is to North Carolina, this guy Roy Williams is to the folks in Kansas. They love him there, and he is very happy there as well. Might be hard to turn down the job here, though. Who knows? Dean Smith was and still is a father figure to so many of his players. Two of his best-known players, members of the 1982 championship team. We were there in New Orleans to see it, folks. Breakfast at Brennan's and all kinds of good stuff. Michael Jordan and James Worthy both say he meant so much just playing for a guy like this.
He's made an impact on so many players and people's lives that now he's entitled to do that for his family, and certainly we support his decision, and we've all learned from him and grown from him.
I mean, he meant everything to the sport, but he also meant so much to life. I mean, he really stood for student first, athlete second.
When Dean talked about his retirement, he made it very clear. He highly recommended Bill Guthridge to take over for how many years, whatever. It was also a case of the general, I think, giving a very loyal lieutenant a chance to take the spotlight now, and that is typical Dean Smith.
Yeah. Well, my friends have granted me a few seconds here to share some thoughts with you. For so many years, we've depended on Dean Smith. Even people who weren't fans could depend on Coach Smith to be on that bench every November. We could depend on his team to play with enthusiasm, confidence, and desire to always point to a teammate to thank them for a pass. And we could usually depend on them to graduate and to go back often to Chapel Hill. Some of us are sad today for ourselves. Sad that in a world where nothing seems certain, we're losing someone who always seemed to be there. But we shouldn't be sad. We were lucky, truly lucky, to be part of the Dean Smith era.
Amen.
And you have to be happy for him.
On World News Tonight this Thursday, the Attorney General is angry at the White House. Why didn't they tell her sooner about the videotapes of Mr. Clinton? The videotape of President Reagan with his supporters in the White House. Is it the same thing? That was a very devastating hurricane which beat up on the west coast of Mexico. Many lives have been lost. And the basketball legend from North Carolina. Enough, he says, I want to stay home.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We begin again tonight on the Finally this evening, college basketball may never be the same again. Dean Smith, the coach of the University of North Carolina Tar Heels, announced today that he is retiring. He is simply a giant in the game. He has won more games, in fact, in college basketball than any other coach in history, and very few people have done as much to shape the game that he is now leaving behind. ABC's Aaron Brown tonight tells us why.
With a directness befitting his Kansas upbringing, Dean Smith ended his storied career in a single sentence.
I have decided to resign as head basketball coach at the University of North Carolina.
At 66, the greatest coach in the history of college basketball said he had not lost his enthusiasm for the game, but for all the other demands of being a big-time college coach. The recruiting trips, the appearances, all the time on the road.
I enjoy basketball. I enjoy coaching basketball. It's the out-of-season things that I haven't been able to handle very well.
The numbers tell a part of Dean Smith's story. 879 wins, 26 appearances in the NCAA tournament, 10 times in the Final Four, 2 national championships.
He meant everything to the sport. But he also meant so much to life. I mean, he really stood for student first, athlete second.
That's the other part of the Dean Smith story, the larger part. The part that has nothing to do with on-court brilliance. In his 36 years, there were no scandals, no probation, Not once was his team in trouble with the NCAA. And in the 60s, when many Southern teams recruited only white players, Dean Smith recruited Charlie Scott.
Coach Smith's philosophy was that he didn't want you to think of yourself any differently. He didn't want anybody to think that he thought of anybody else as any different.
His greatest player may be his biggest fan. Michael Jordan's last-second basket won Smith his first NCAA championship in 1982.
He's like a second father to me. He had confidence in me when I didn't have confidence in myself at that particular time.
There's not a single North Carolina player or assistant coach that worked for him that makes a major decision in their life without checking with Coach Smith.
Someday someone may win more games than Dean Smith. That's the nature of sport. But it's hard to imagine that anyone will mean as much to the game and his players as the man who retired in Chapel Hill today. Aaron Brown, ABC News.
Some leader. That is our report on World News Tonight. Later on 2020 Thursday, what is going on in Florida that is drawing people from around the globe to a religious revival that has now lasted for 2 years? And on Nightline later this evening, the audio tapes from the Johnson White House. Ted Koppel will be talking with Lady Bird Johnson. I'm Peter Jennings. Have a good evening. Hope we'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
Tomas has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source. ABC News, now always on.